Welcome to FamilyCon 2020. I am honored to be one of your co-chairs for FamilyCon this year. I'd like to introduce you to my amazing co-chairs, you'll see their faces throughout the next couple of days. Chelsea and Rob.
Hey guys, I'm Chelsea Spruance. I am a 27-year-old adult with CF. I'm joining you from the lovely Caribbean in the island of St. Thomas. I'm so excited that you guys are here for FamilyCon this year. It's going to be so many amazing connections. I was diagnosed when I was a little babe, and my parents were amazing, and probably you will know why when you see my own parent in the following keynote. But I'm so excited to have you guys here, so I hope you enjoy.
And I am Rob Ronenberg, not nearly as nice a weather as Chelsea. I am in Byron, Minnesota. I am married to a wonderful, amazing woman who has cystic fibrosis. And as Chelsea said, Mary, we're just very excited to have you here. And thank you for joining us. And I will let things progress.
Thanks, guys. We couldn't do this without you. So appreciate all your support. Again, my name is Mary Sullivan. I have 3 adult daughters, and one has cystic fibrosis. I can't wait to see the connections that are made today and Saturday. I have the distinct honor of moderating this keynote panel, which is incredible. We're so excited to have you all join us for this very special keynote on mental and emotional wellness. I'm joined by 3 amazing speakers who will share how the mental aspect of cystic fibrosis has a strong impact on our lives and how they've found ways to cope. But before we get to our introductions, I want to go over a few items related to the technology and how we interact. We will be taking audience questions during this session. I encourage you to please ask questions. If you've got a question, you can submit it at any time by clicking the icon on the right side of your screen labeled Q&A. You can also see other questions there. Give a thumbs up if you want that question to be answered. We encourage you to ask questions, and we will do our very best to answer as many as possible. You'll also notice a chat bubble on the right side of your screen as well. That is a group chat for everyone who is in this session. You can open or hide it at any time by clicking on the icon. If you have questions for the speakers, please make sure to use the Q&A icon to submit the question, not the group chat. If you have any technology problems during the panel, please go to the Tech and Program Support home screen of the event. It looks like a coffee shop, but again, we encourage you to make connections, connect with others in the group chat, but again, utilize your Q&A for questions. So kicking off our panel, I'd like you to meet Megan, Tom, and Isabel. Megan?
Hi, thanks, Mary. My name's Megan Barker, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about finding your community kind of within the CF community, and I guess really within any community. I'm a respiratory therapist who fell in love with her patients. That doesn't happen real often. It's kind of frowned upon, but not really a huge rule follower here. I have been a CF spouse for about 12 years, and I definitely recognize the importance of having a community that you can turn to. Obviously, as a respiratory therapist, I learned about CF in school, and working with CF patients, I kind of got to see a little bit of what life looked like. But I can tell you that knowing CF from an academic stance and then knowing CF from a partner stance is completely different. We were dating for about 2-3 months when Ty had his first tune-up, and despite having met him in the hospital, I went into complete meltdown. It was like I completely forgot everything that I had learned about CF, everything that I knew to be true. I mean, I knew that frequent hospitalizations were a part of it, but it just was completely lost on me. And I don't know. It just felt like everything bad was going to happen, even though I knew, it was going to be fine in the back of my head. It just kind of was this overwhelming panic. So much so that I felt the need to stay with him every single day of every single admission. The fact that we didn't kill each other is kind of miraculous, but we got through. And, in those moments, that's what I needed, because I needed to be able to see with my own eyes that he was okay. And thankfully, he kind of just rolled with it. He, was like, all right, crazy lady. But around the 3rd or 4th time that he got admitted, I kind of started feeling like I needed to have somebody to talk to. My parents and my friends are an amazing source of support, but until I met Ty, I don't think that they even knew what the word cystic fibrosis were, let alone knew someone that actually had it, to offer any kind of support in any way. And so I kept thinking there's got to be somebody that I can talk to between the 50 million phone calls to insurance companies and the grueling hospitalizations and everything. Just having somebody to vent to was just, it was such a need, but I didn't know where to turn. And the CF Foundation is amazing, and there are some amazing resources available to the CF community for parenting a child with CF. I was lost. There's not anything that I could find that was for someone like me who didn't have the benefit of seeing someone grow up with CF and having years on years and years of experience. So here I was just kind of floundering going, okay, thankfully his doctors are amazing and I have talked to them and spent quality time with them, but it's not the same. I wanted somebody who knew what the ins and outs, the day-to-day life was like. So I started looking, and as it happened, I came across a blog that was written by a CF wife, and literally sat there in tears for hours reading this blog, because every word that she wrote mimicked every feeling that I'd had. The good, the bad, the ugly, the up, the down, all of it was stuff that I could have written. And I thought, wow. So I reached out to her, and we've been friends for 11 years. And she is still my go-to person when CF gets heavy. And it's so nice just to know, okay, I've got this person that I can reach out to, it was just a relief. When her husband had his transplant, I was her phone call. And, anytime anything comes up, it's still just, it's nice to know that person's there. So after talking with her, I started thinking, I'm like, there needs to be a group for people like us. There needs to be a resource, a place where people can go and find that community, people that like minds, like experiences. And so I kind of started just randomly looking for things, and I came across a few other spouses, but there needed to be something that was wider reaching, something that more people could find. So in 2016, when the CF Foundation announced their impact grants, I pitched them an idea, and I said, we have these amazing drugs in the pipeline that are promising longer lives for our loved ones. There's going to be more spouses that come, down the road. And so as luck would have it, they agreed. And so when the inaugural group of impact grants, Project CF Spouse was a recipient. And so I was kind of able to take my need for having a community of people to talk to and create a nonprofit that now serves 400 plus spouses in the community. So it's been such a blessing. I know for a long time I felt really lost in dealing with CF. I try to keep things with Ty because I don't like to add to his plate. But did I go away? Oh, okay, good. I came back. I try to keep things on, an even keel with him, but it's important, I think, to make sure that people know that there is a place in the community for them, and there's a place for them to go. So that is my story about finding community, and I hope that you guys know where your community is. If you're a spouse or a partner, come find us because we're here. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Tom.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you all for joining this keynote address on mental and wellness for CF. My name is Tom Spruance. As you are now aware, my daughter Chelsea is co-chair of this event. She, of course, as she said, is 27 years old and has CF. I also have a son, Preston, who is 19, and he doesn't have CF, and I live in Wilmington, Delaware. I wanted to share with you something tonight that helped me in dealing with CF as a parent, but also something that strengthened the relationship that I have with my daughter and with my son. And interestingly enough, it wasn't just prompted by having to deal with a chronic disease, but also I had a desire that I wanted to be more empathetic to the challenges that my son and my daughter were facing as they were growing up. And I also kind of wanted to give a little fatherly wisdom and a little bit of guidance to them. So when they were young, I got out my little pencil and paper and started writing down some notes about what was motivating me, why I was doing the things that I was doing. And basically, it was kind of like a dad's diary. Well, if you knew me the way my kids know me, I have a tendency of kind of going overboard with things. An dear old dad's diary morphed into something a little bit more. So upon graduating from high school, each of them when they were graduating and before they were going off to college, I presented them with a book. Yes, a 128-page hardbound book with 19 chapters of fatherly thoughts, guidance, and wisdom. Now, I also wanted to let them know how dear old Dad ticked, so I had a couple things there about some of my quirks. There weren't many, but there were a few. But I also agreed with them that maybe, just maybe, the way I was raising them, they may not agree with 100%. Maybe there were some things they didn't think was right. And with that, I said, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you an opportunity to provide your comments about what I had said in the book. So each left-hand page of the book is blank. And if you'll see at the top, it says Chelsea's Thoughts, giving Chelsea an opportunity, and Preston with his book, there were 2 books, an opportunity to comment about the way I was raising him and what they thought, so forth. And it was very interesting because they really enjoyed commenting and talking about the book. Now, as this progressed, what we ended up with was an interesting insight into the thoughts and personalities of 2 generations, which then could be passed on to their children, which I thought was a pretty cool idea. Anyway, that's my opinion. But the interesting part about this was, in retrospect, the actual act of sitting down and writing what I thought, how I feel, and some of the forces and factors that I was faced with really helped my mental and emotional wellness in dealing with CF. It gave me an opportunity to think about what I was facing. And one of the most frustrating things was that I was facing a disease that basically reduced my ability as a father to keep my daughter healthy. And that was extremely frustrating to me. So in looking at it from that perspective, I thought, well, what can I do and what can I say to help her and support her? So, I don't know, some people do some things. I wrote a book. I don't know. Anyway, and the interesting part about the book was that I told her, I said, I'm writing this because I want you to realize that I will always be there for you. And I want to be there for you not so much as a guide, but as a fellow traveler. And that's why the book is titled My Journey with Chelsea, a journey in which she would have a lot of say into what direction we were going to go in, different problems that we were confronted with, and how we would deal with those problems. So it worked out quite well in that respect. So I wanted to finally just end with 2 points that I think has helped me as a father and a parent with CF. And the first is, if you have the time, take time and go out and write down in your little composition notebook with your pencil, as I did many years ago, and write down your thoughts and think about what's motivating you, why are you doing what you're doing, and why you're thinking the way you're thinking. It really helped me in navigating many of the challenges that I had to deal with CF. And secondly, and very importantly, I tried to be very empathetic. I tried to listen to what both my daughter and my son had to say. There is a huge generation difference. There are some common threads between generations, but each generation is different. So each morning when I wake up and look in the mirror, which is sometimes a pretty scary sight, I look and I go, Tom, you have got 2 of these and you have got 1 of these. Use them proportionately. And it definitely helped me in my mental and emotional wellness in dealing with CF. And now I'm going to pass the ball over to Isabel, and she's got also some very interesting comments, which I think you'll enjoy. Isabel?
Thank you so much, Tom. You are a hard act to follow. And Megan also, thank you for sharing your insights on the things that helped you and your family members cope well with cystic fibrosis and maintain healthy mental health. So I'm Isabel, or Isa Stenzel Byrnes. I'm 48 years old from Redwood City, California. And I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis along with my twin sister, Anna, back when the life expectancy was 10 years. I was hospitalized over 18 times as a child, despite my adherence to my treatments. Thanks to my very supportive parents, Anna and I strove to live a normal life We went to college and pursued careers. Both my sister and I endured the inevitable decline of cystic fibrosis. At age 28 for Anna and age 32 for me, we both received double lung transplants and were blessed with the gift of health and normalcy as adults. I currently work full-time as a licensed clinical social worker and a grief counselor. So how did I survive and thrive with CF all these years? In addition to the social support that Megan talked about and the storytelling and sharing that Tom talked about, I firmly believe that aside from the miraculous medical advancements, I believe my psychosocial health has allowed me to overcome my circumstances and live a great life. I like to focus on two areas of mental health that stand out for me: how I learned to live with loss, and also how I learned to live with optimism. First, I learned to live with loss consciously and intentionally. And that meant not avoiding or escaping difficult emotions, but acknowledging and accepting all of them as part of life. I thank my CF community, many of you, for teaching me how to grieve all the losses this disease has presented to me over the years. And when I say loss, I don't just mean loss to death. I mean all the other losses we experience because of CF. Not being able to have a burger without pills or an insulin shot, not looking my age or being a slow, late bloomer when I was a teenager, not being able to stay up all night in college, not being able to follow the career path I wanted. I wanted to be a park ranger, not being able to survive without a transplant, or in my circumstance, not to have a child. Of course, I also grieve the death of my CF peers over the years, so many of them, and the death of my twin sister Anna 6 years ago. So living with loss has changed me. I learned that I am who I am today because of the people who've made a significant imprint in my life, even if they're no longer here. And this fills me with great gratitude. Grief is a normal and natural response to the loss of something significant or to something or someone to which we are emotionally attached. There's nothing wrong with all the grieving all the losses that are part of living with CF. So what does grief look like? A lot of tears, anger, envy, feeling lonely and different, emotions that I did not have to become ashamed of. I grieved each hospitalization, each drop in lung function, each thing I had to give up because of my CF. In the CF community, we know many people have depression and anxiety, but I feel like grief is the under-recognized mental health challenge in CF. Grief is not pathology. It's expected and understandable. Grief just needs to be acknowledged and recognized. Sometimes I think more of us need a grief counselor other than an antidepressant pill. What helped me grieve was to have the CF community where we could talk about our losses, express them, and share them. We could cry together. I learned how to grieve with authenticity and vulnerability. We also shared an annual ritual where we remember our friends who have died. This socially sanctioned ceremony is not depressing or heavy. It was a way to honor that we are part of this community and we won't forget and we won't be forgotten. What also helped me was telling stories and writing, just like Tom. So my sister and I wrote a memoir called The Power of Two to honor people we've lost and what we've been through. Writing helped us see our own resilience and strength to carry all those losses and still live a good life. Another choice I had in coping with losses was to shift my focus into life-affirming activities, such as athletics, travel, close relationships, and hobbies. These losses didn't define me, but rather helped to target my passions and make my life an amazing adventure. My learning to live with loss has helped me cultivate creativity, to play music, and to make art. And loss ultimately helped me find meaning by following my calling to become a grief counselor. Another important part of my mental health was living with optimism. This means having faith and believing all the struggle was for something bigger than myself. Despite all the losses in my life, I chose to feel hopeful anyway. I chose to take turns focusing on positive things rather than focusing on the losses. I chose to pursue a normal life of college and job, marriage, even though all the medical evidence was showing that I was losing the battle to CF. So some denial can be protective and adaptive. I chose to believe that something good was going to happen. Even at the end of my life, in my deathbed, before my transplant, I believed there would be a miracle and a donor lungs would become available. Even when my sister died, the hardest experience of any sibling with CF, I had hope that we will meet again someday. There are so many times where it didn't make sense to be optimistic, but I chose optimism anyway. Each one of us will have our own way of finding hope. To me, one way of conquering our circumstances is to gain control of our attitudes. It is hard work and it takes time. It has taken me 48 years to work on reducing the power of anxiety, fear, and worry, and instead empowering myself with surrender, faith, hope, and grace. You are all on your own journey. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you all for sharing your story so much. My eyeballs are just, okay, a little bit, they're sweating, but I just want to thank y'all so much. I have a couple of questions, and we've gotten some questions in too, but Isa, you shared previously that speaking about your life validates it a little bit. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Thank you, sure. I think that sometimes having a disease and being different is something that can be shameful or embarrassing, but being able to talk to people about CF and have an audience that listens and cares can be an affirmation of our efforts and make something that's different into something positive. So I think one of the big sort of steps for me was to remove shame from my illness and let my story as someone with CF become a role in helping me become an ambassador. So if I don't use my voice and talk about CF, then people aren't going to know about this disease. So it has been sort of mutually beneficial for others to learn. It also invites other people who have diabetes or cancer, or other problems, to share their struggles.
Yep, I think that's awesome. I appreciate that so much. As always, we talk about cystic fibrosis because this is our community, but we don't know what's going on in the house next door to us. So I appreciate that so much. Megan, talk to us a little bit about how you communicate with others about possibly your mental health or what Ty may be going through and what those struggles and health needs may be.
So for me, one of the main things that I kind of have always done, Ty and I have always talked very openly about his CF. It's never been something that he hid from me or that I didn't ask about. I mean, it's just I literally talk to his doctors more than he talks to them. So I clearly am very involved in his stuff. But on those times where I feel like I'm freaking out about something, whether it be something nonsense or something that's big, I kind of just have made myself a promise that I'm not going to add anything to Ty's plate, because I know that if I'm feeling it, he's feeling it. Like if I'm worried about something with his health, he's worried about it because he's the one who's physically experiencing it. And so those are the times where I reach out to the people that I know understand and really try to, kind of just say, okay, let me talk over here. That way I'm doing what I need to do for me to still be in a good headspace and be strong, where I can be that supportive person for him. And so, I've always made it very easy for him to talk to me, and I always want it to feel like that. And so I think it's important knowing that you've got someplace that you can go to take care of yourself so that you're still in a good place for your person.
So real quick follow-up, because I will tell you, I told you I have a 20-year-old daughter with cystic fibrosis, and when we went into our first CF support group meeting, we walked out and said, okay, we're not going back there. That was depressing. So how did you, I know you reached out to the other spouse, but how would you recommend others finding their community and their support in this disease? Because it is so rare and so it is really heavy.
You know, in the beginning, it was very interesting, like when I would meet people and I would talk to them, because, you know, I never wanted to talk about Ty dying. I never wanted to talk about him being sick enough that was a reality. We did a spirit night one night as a fundraiser, and I had somebody ask me what his life expectancy was, and I literally thought I was going to come undone. And so I kind of just put that away. So in the beginning, it was all, hey, yeah, okay, you can talk. Let's talk about the fun things. Let's talk about it. And so as time has gone by and I've gotten more comfortable with, I don't think comfortable is the right word, but more accepting of the realities of life with CF, it's easier to kind of say, okay, the ugly exists, so, you know, and talk about it. But, you know, I have people send me messages all the time that say, I just need to talk. And so I think sometimes just being honest with yourself and saying, you know, I need help. I need somebody that I can talk to. I need somebody that is going to listen. I think that's a good place to start.
I think that's incredible. Thank you. Tom, I want to ask you, CF takes so much of your life, and as a CF parent, it's so overwhelming at times. So how do you balance yourself and your mental health and your physical health and all of your wellness to make sure that you're there for your kiddos? I think you're muted, Tom.
I sound better the other way, but anyway, the key, I think, if you were looking at mental and emotional wellness, you have got to be physically fit as well. And I really work on physical fitness, and I know my daughter Chelsea works out a lot. And if I give you a little bit of a comparison, say you've got a guy who's a race car driver and he's won the Daytona 500 3 times. And you come up to him and go, hey, I'd like you to drive my car, race my car in the 500. And he takes a look at your car. The tires aren't too good. He listens to it. It's not tuned up real well. The brakes don't seem too good. So I don't care how good of a driver the guy is. In other words, how much he has in his head, he is not going to get around and win that race unless that car is in shape. And that's the same way with your body. I think as a CF parent and anyone that's involved with this challenging disease, you have to take time and take care of yourself. And that includes diet, exercise. Sleep is a very important factor in maintaining good health, and also meditation. I do yoga nidra and yoga. Chelsea is a yoga instructor and has got me bent around like a pretzel sometimes, but it helps, and it really does. And I think if you want to improve your mental and emotional wellness, you should definitely have your physical wellness up to speed.
That's great. I love the analogy of the race car. That's perfect. So we had some questions come in. Megan, the name of your nonprofit is Project CF Spouse. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Had that question. Okay, Tom, how much time did your journaling, I lost it a minute, take during each day?
Say that again. How much time?
Mm-hmm. How much time did your journal usually take during a day as you were putting these books together for your kiddos?
Well, here's the interesting part. I would write it, and then I would put it down. And then I would, go off, and then I would do what cows do. I would ruminate. I would chew on what I had written, and I'd think about it. And then I'd go back, and it was interesting. The more that I ruminated, all of a sudden things started opening up, and I started looking at things. But a very important part about this, which helped me, was I tried to look at what was motivating me to raise my kids in the way that I'm raising them. And I have a chapter in the book that is called Parental Baggage. And we all come to the table, to the parent table, the family table, with thoughts, biases, and everything. And what we have to be very careful of is try not to project those onto your children. Give them an opportunity. And that's really, when I was writing the book, I thought, God, Tom, you're pushing a bias. Don't do that. That's not the right way to do it. So I started writing this, I don't know, 6 years. I guess I was working on it and actually it wasn't, I couldn't find it, but it was one of those composition notebooks, the black and whites that I had written down. And finally I said, okay, now I'm going to put it in a book. And it took maybe 2 years to put it in this form. So it takes some time.
I love that. Thank you so much. Isa, we had a question come in as an older, and I'm not calling you older. Just
I'm happy to be older.
Yeah, embrace it. As an older adult, this person is 51. How do you deal with survivor's guilt? I know that that's an issue with cystic fibrosis patients. So talk to us about that, especially knowing that you've lost your twin sister.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a little different perspective on that. First of all, I think survivor's guilt is harder when we don't receive what our siblings or our loved ones received. Anna and I both received a lung transplant. We both had these wonderful, vibrant, positive, joyful years. We experienced and celebrated the publishing of our book and the making of a documentary. She had an extraordinary life. And another thing that helps me with survivor guilt is that she actually took me in the last final weeks of her life and she put her arms around my shoulders and she shook me and said, promise me you'll still live a good life. Keep living. Keep enjoying your life. Do everything you can to stay healthy. And the fact that she could actually directly say that to me helps me every day, that I'm living my life not just for myself, but also for her, enjoying things that she couldn't enjoy on her behalf. I also have a deep spiritual faith that I'm not really in charge of my life. I am, because I'm in compliant and I make sure my blood sugar is okay and I exercise and all of that. I do what I can. But when it came back to the end of my life, when my lungs with CF failed, I was on the transplant list and I went into lung failure, and that was it. But then I woke up with new lungs. So that was my time of surrender, that it's really not up to me. And so I firmly give all of that survivor guilt to someone or something else that's in control, and that's not me. And I also really rather weigh my survivor guilt with gratitude. I'm still here and I'm forever grateful, no matter how long I live, with being around to tell the stories of the people that I loved and lost.
I think that's incredible, just recognizing the gratitude in the midst of all the grief and the loss that we've all, dealt with. So this is a question that came through is, and this is a tough one. I'm going to just open it up to all three of you. How can we keep cystic fibrosis from being the center of our emotional, I'm sorry, my screen keeps, universes, given that each of us, patients, parents, spouses, is so much more than a member of the CF community. And this is so true. It really is overwhelming at times. It takes up a lot of not just our day, but our emotions, our mental health, our financial. How do we do that? And I don't know who to start with. Megan, I'll start with you and you can answer that if possible.
Sorry, I didn't want to unmute. And that is hard. I CF is so much a part of our everyday life. I mean, I joke that there's never a time where I'm not a respiratory therapist. I mean, my life revolves around breathing in some capacity. I think that embracing the things that aren't CF, you kind of just take stock of what you have. We have good days where we're able to go and do things as a family and everything is great. And I I forget that he has CF some days. I mean, just truly, it's not a thing. And so I think that keeping a mental note of the things that you have to be grateful for and the things that are not CF things, I think that that's a good place to start. If that makes sense.
It does. You said, do you have perspective on that as well?
I would say to be honest with yourself. So if CF is a big deal, then it will be the emotional center of the universe. If it's a smaller deal, it won't be. Maybe there's other stressors as well. And also, just like Megan said, in my book, I actually wrote about what it was like to be a twin, what it was like to be biracial, to be half Japanese, that there's many different parts of our identities that make us who we are. And so I would encourage people to explore for themselves, who are you other than the CF label? So that's kind of repetitive to what Megan said. But if it takes up a lot of your space in your world, then unfortunately, it's also asking to be acknowledged and to be honored in a way that we wish we didn't have to, but it's asking for that.
I agree. Tom, anything on that topic?
The only thing that I would say, and I'm spoiled, I've got a special kid. She is so organized and has everything done that you don't even know sometimes that she has cystic fibrosis. And I'll give you a perfect example. When she graduated from high school, I turned to her and I said, Chels, what would you like to do? Something really exciting. And let's do something because you've graduated and you're going off to college. And without batting an eye, she said, I'd like to go cage diving with great white sharks. Well, I want to tell you, when my son graduated, I gave him 3 options of what he could do. It was no longer an open-ended question. But my point is, and I talk about this on Saturday, is I think you've got to, as parents, you have to drop the reins a little bit, and you have to let them take over. Have a little confidence in the way that you've raised them, and really the stress starts to melt away. And you almost, God, you got to, like I think Izzy just said, you got to remember they got CF. You go, some of them are just amazing, and it's just a very strong force.
I totally agree. I've got another question here, and I'm sorry my computer is acting kind of funky, but talking about COVID, we're in kind of a strange time right now. We're pretty much self-isolating as a community, and we've kind of been doing that for, I don't know, since 2013, I think, or 2011. But what impact does that have on your mental health, and how do you get around the isolation? Because, this is an ever-changing, it's a very fluid environment, but it's something that we think about. And, we've been walking into office buildings and doctor's offices with masks and gloves for, 20 years. And then all of a sudden this hits, and it's a new world. So how do you get around the isolation that could result from that particular situation?
Who?
Lisa, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
I would say we do this. We do this. We connect with each other across the country, across the world. We know we're still out there. It's so important to maintain, for me, contact with people, because I do get energy from others. And I connect with my family once a week. My family is all over the world, so we connect on Zoom. So just, again, trying to be creative with connection with others. And in terms of connection with healthcare providers and keeping myself safe, it's a constant juggle, as I'm sure it is with everyone on this event here, to balance risk and benefit. And also to balance quality of life with the small chance that we could catch an infection or get sicker. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, Mary.
I think it does. And yes, Tom.
Chelsea made an interesting comment when the whole COVID thing broke. And she turned to me and she said, "Now you know how I feel." And I thought that was interesting in that every time somebody coughs, every time somebody sneezes, she got a chill. And I never thought of it that way. But that part of it was, and I know this doesn't necessarily answer your question, but that part of it that has stuck with me when she said, and that gave the reality of what each CFer has to go through every day was really, I watch these people with their mask and people coughing and I go, God, poor Chelsea, she got to go through that with or without COVID. She's dealing with that. But we don't communicate that much because she lives in the Virgin Islands and I'm in Delaware and I don't want to see what she's doing down there in the Virgin Islands. No, that's not true. We communicate every day, but she's got a better life than I do at this point, which I'm happy about. So.
You do, and it makes me very jealous because I'll talk to her and she's on her boat, and it's really not fair to any of us, I think, at all. But I think that might be against the law, but I'm not going to report her.
You bring up a good point, Tom, about how we adapt to living with fear and living with threat, that something as simple as those sprayers at the vegetable produce part of the grocery store can actually give us an infection. And so little by little, we learn how to function in the world as happily and normally as possible, despite this constant presence of something that could get us sick, someone else next to us, for example.
Completely agree. And I feel like we're almost kind of living a modification of what we've been living for the last, 10, 20 years, and adjusting to what's happening right now. Megan, I wanted to ask you about how do you handle, this is something that, I think we've all struggled with, family members or friends who don't really have knowledge of cystic fibrosis and kind of are like, well, he looks fine, or, she looks okay. How do you deal with that?
So that happened a lot when we first got together. I got he's in the hospital again. If I've been asked that once, I've probably been asked that a billion times, which I'm sure you guys can all relate to that. I look at, anytime something like that comes up, I look at it as an opportunity to raise awareness, to get somebody else excited about wanting to get involved in the CF community. I invite, every year our Great Strides team grows because I found somebody new who I can share my story with. And, so it gets frustrating sometimes when you say the same things over and over to the same people. But thankfully, most of the people that I've come across that have had questions they've been excited to learn about it. They're like, what can we do to help? How can we get involved? And so that, I think in that aspect, it's made it less frustrating.
Always challenging, but less frustrating, I would definitely say. And Isa, you grew up in a different time, and I remember you talking about doing your treatments in your brother's van and that sort of a thing. So what was that like growing up and talking to your friends, and how comfortable were you sharing your story of cystic fibrosis? And when were you completely comfortable? Because now I know you're completely comfortable, and I love that no topic is off limits, but there was not always that time.
Yes, right. It was a long process. That's what I mentioned in my comments. It took me decades to become comfortable. And I think when I realized that this is a disease I can't help it. I'm born this way. And then I felt secure with myself. I felt enough self-esteem from all the other things in my life that gave me self-esteem. And that CF wasn't going to go away. This was something I had to accept as part of my life. Then I think I've started to be more open about it. But when I was a child, I was very embarrassed and ashamed, and part of that is Japanese culture, but I didn't want to be different. So it is a long process to get used to it. I also almost unconsciously and consciously chose environments where I knew that my CF would be accepted. And so I chose the healthcare field. I work mostly with women. I work mostly now now my job is in hospice. And so the hospice people are the nicest people on the planet. They do not discriminate based on health condition. And so they actually embrace it and see it as a strength. And so that has been my strategy, is to move towards places where having CF would be a strength and not a weakness.
Very good. Thank you so much. Megan, I think this is for you. My girlfriend has CF and I'm constantly worried for her. I worry more than she does some. I often don't want her to go out because I worry, but I also don't want to keep her from living the life she loves. How do you encourage your significant other to stay healthy without keeping them from what brings them joy? That's a tough one. Go, Megan.
I was gonna say that's tricky. I mean, I think it's natural for you to worry more about your person that's sick than you are. I mean, because if you're the healthy partner in the relationship, it's it's not something that you really had to deal with, and so it's all very new for you, and every sickness and every little thing, COVID's a prime example of how it's like, oh my gosh, and you can't help but panic and you can't help but worry. But at the end of the day, I always say Ty's been dealing with this for 42 years. He knows better about his body and what is acceptable and what's not. And so I just kind of take my cues from him. Obviously over time you learn, you recognize things, you recognize signs of an exacerbation, you recognize, other little things. And so that's when, I'll be like, hey, have you walked on the treadmill today? Have you done a treatment? Do you need to do a treatment? Should you do a treatment? I can hear you wheezing. That's when the nagging starts. But, I would say in the early stages of any relationship, just kind of find your footing and watch them, take your cues from them, and then just kind of go from there.
Thank you. Isa, I want to ask you, because you're a person with CF and you're post-transplant and you've lost your sister and you've had a lot, but you also are married happily and have an amazing dog. Do you ever have an idea or a sense of where your husband may be needing some support, and what do you do? Well, how do you approach that?
I definitely feel like he needs support because he's married to me. And one way that I cope is I do complain and I do whine, because there's a lot to whine about. And he's always my sounding board. But I want to really make sure that our relationship is somewhat balanced, even though I whine more than he does. And I always ask him, like, how are you? What's going on for you? What are you worried about? And just make sure that his mental health is okay, not regarding CF, but regarding work and life and family and all of the stressors that are in life anyway. So I feel like I used to feel when I was younger that how could he marry me? I'm such a burden. He's doing me a favor by marrying me. But now as an older adult, I realize, no, I'm actually giving him support, love, care, guidance, presence, maybe even, if I can say this, sort of life perspective, existential intelligence, meaning, all of those things that maybe he wouldn't even have if he was married to a, quote, regular 48-year-old spouse. I don't know. I'm just saying that CF is not all negative. We actually offer our partners really gifts as well. And that's something I learned only later in my marriage.
And then with that, how do you, as yourself, as a CF person, feel like you're not a burden on him?
Right. Well, I try to be as independent as I possibly can. And that means, like, at 3 a.m. in January, I got out of the house with my car keys and drove to the ER without waking him up. Because it made him really angry after. But I went to the ER myself and dealt with it myself, and that was fine. But I think ultimately, it's hard. No matter what, I am dependent on my husband. I am not financially dependent. I'm dependent on his health insurance. And so we are interdependent. I make him food and I, do the dishes and stuff like that. Like, we have these sort of intertwined roles. So I make sure that I'm offering him, as much as my body will allow, some gifts in his life to not just be a burden. Yeah.
That's amazing. Tom, I'm getting a lot of questions about your book and how you put it together and how you had it bound and how you kind of facilitated all that. Can you kind of give us a little background? Because I love it. I'm glad that people are asking about it.
Well, I'm not a publisher, I can assure you of that. But I just went to a printing company and I first of all put it on my laptop, and I went off from the black and white composition notebook and put it on a laptop and just started typing it out. But I go back to the original question. I mean, I think I said 6 years. My son was born the same day I was born, but a few years later. But that was when I really started it. And he is 19 now, and he got his when he graduated. So I probably was working on it 12 years. But you can go to a printing shop and they can put it together for you. And it's really not that hard to bind something like this. And it's not really as expensive as you would think. And I just thought it was something really special. And interestingly enough, when I visit both my kids, I find this book sitting somewhere. You know, it's either on their bedstand or even Preston, when he went to the University of Miami, he gave it to his roommate. And his roommate said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Well, it's something my dad wrote." He said, "Do you mind if I read it?" And he read the whole thing. So, you know, how do you do it? It's simple. Go to a printer and type it out on your laptop and go for it.
I love that. Could not love that more. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I think people want a copy, Tom.
I know. They're like, where did he get that? You know, so yeah, I totally agree. Real quick and last question, but how do you find self-worth and self-love? And Isabel, start with you, and then Megan and Tom, despite cystic fibrosis. Where do you get that?
It took some time because for me, my illness was so dominant for so many years. But I used experiences that were part of CF and tried to find ways to find self-esteem within those. For example, starting a business in the hospital, writing a journal and publishing the journal in the hospital. Things that made me feel good about myself, even though I had CF, and also seeing CF as a gateway for positive opportunities, like, you know, we call it in psychology secondary gain, where we can get something positive from a difficult situation. So I really also found what my strengths were. So I focused on academics and did well in school, and to do that helped my self-esteem. Loved music and art, and that helped me build out my self-esteem. So pursuing activities that made me feel good about myself to compensate for the sort of challenges of CF really helped to make me feel worthy. Thank you for that question.
Well said.
No, thank you. Megan, how about you?
So I think for me, I like my ability to give back is what I do. Project CF Spouse is such a passion project for me, simply because I know what it felt like when I found Amanda. And so I think being able to take my experiences with CF and use those for something that is helping other people, I think that's my biggest thing. I mean, that's when I say that's my project. I go to work, and my downtime at work is me on my phone working on something to, you know, pertaining to Project CF Spouse, because I believe that it's such an important asset to have to anybody that's on this journey with CF, and you know, really being able to use that to help others is what makes me happy.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree with you, Megan. That kind of, you stole my thunder, because that's really, you know, and I will quote one quote, CF and dealing with my daughter makes me want to be a better person. And in that, watching her and how she deals with it, I go, gosh, and that inspires me. And it almost gives me, dealing with CF and dealing with all of you in this FamilyCon, gives me a purpose. I love to deal with people that really are into this and really doing it in a very positive and constructive way. I don't know what my life would be like without CF, to tell you the truth. And I don't mean that, gee, I wish she didn't have it. Sure, I wish she didn't have it. But I allowed CF to make me a better person. As Isabel talked about earlier, I looked at the positive sides of it. I looked at what can I control and how can I make life a little bit better. And I don't know. And as Megan says too, it just gets you excited, you know, and you feel good about things. So.
Thank you all so much. I'm sorry, I'm wiping my eyes. They're just, you know, I'm in South Texas and it's super hot here, so my eyeballs are sweating. I'm not tearing up at all. But I have to say, in all honesty, I truly think we had the best. We had Chelsea's dad, Tom, and we had Megan, a CF spouse. You're amazing. And Isa, you know how amazing I think you are. Sharing your stories and being so open and honest with us has just been incredible. And for all of you out there, I know we didn't get to all of your questions. I hope we got to most of them, but thank you so much for joining us. We hope this empowers you to have similar conversations in your breakout sessions today, right after this. So take a look at the personal agenda that we've emailed to you and join your peers to facilitate for a facilitated keynote follow-up discussion and share your experiences and questions relating to mental and emotional wellness. We look forward to seeing you in the breakouts. Sessions will begin at 8:15 Eastern time, which in Texas is 7:15, and Isabel, that's for you, what, 5:15, I think?
5:15, yes.
Okay, so you've got 15 minutes for a quick break, grab a drink, grab a snack, and thank you, everyone. This has been wonderful. I really, really, really appreciate all your time. You guys are amazing and inspiring in so many ways.
I just want to thank everyone for writing in the chat. It's a very vibrant and energetic and supportive chat
wonderful
community, so I'm so grateful to be part of this family. Thank you.